Hey everybody, back to finish up this plate. So it's actually been sitting for 2 days now. So let's unwrap it and see how it is. So I've got it kind of thoroughly wrapped here in this plastic. I believe this is probably kind of the last you saw of it, sitting like this. I still want to be careful about picking it up, doing that same thing I was doing before where I'm kind of grabbing both sides and leaning it up on the table against me, kind of keeping this edge down so I'm not bending it in any way. And what I'm feeling for now is this curve is pretty leather hard. It's holding its own. So if I hold it like this, it's not bending or moving at all. So now the whole thing is kind of a nice leather hard state. I feel like this curve is holding itself, and that's what I'm looking for. So I'm ready to finish and seal up the backside of this. You do want to seal up the backside of this because if you leave these gaps in here when you wash this, like I put these in the dishwasher, that will fill with water. When you take it out and put it in your cupboard, it will leak water everywhere. So just, you do really want to get that sealed up. So I'm gonna move this big board out of the way. And I've just got a bat here that I'm going to put on my banding wheel, but you don't have to have a bat. You could have a small board or whatever, or you could use the board you were still using. I'm just putting it on a banding wheel to make it easier to turn, access all the sides. The other thing you want is either a piece of foam. I know in the studio we've got like thick pieces of foam. If you don't have that at home, just fold up a towel and put it down. Anything soft, some kind of fabric, anything that's going to cushion this plate and help it hold its curve. If I put this curved plate on a flat surface and start working these seams, I'm going to tend to flatten it. So I just want something in here that's going to support the clay and kind of form to it as opposed to a hard flat surface. So I've got this folded up towel. This is going to be just fine. All right, so let's get to work on the inside of this. Okay, so I'm ready to start sealing this up, and the first step of that is going to be scoring. So since this is all kind of leather hard already, I'm actually going to add some water to it before I score it, and I'm going to just kind of wet this whole edge here where this wall meets the floor. And I'm going to go around and score it. The reason I wet it first, I'm getting my scoring rib wet too, kind of the tip of that. I just dipped in some water. If you have this all dry and you start scoring it, you're going to get a bunch of little crumbs that then fall into these trapped air areas, and they will shake. Once this thing is done, you'll always have like a little rattle going on with these. So I'm just scoring in that seam there, trying to get it, the score marks on the floor here and also up on the wall here. All right, so that's kind of the first step here. I'm going to get this scored all the way around. So always kind of dipping my rib in the water before I start, because I'm trying to keep those seams wet and keep that clay a little bit wet as I'm scoring to keep those little dry crumbs from falling down inside of the edges of this plate. And as I'm doing these sides that they have a little bit more gap, these are the sides that are on top, I'm also getting down in this corner here. So a little bit underneath instead of just right on this edge. When I'm coming to these corners, I'm making sure to take care and get all the way down in there. All right. So that's kind of all scored up, and what I'm going to do is add a coil all the way around here. Now these pieces, these first pieces might look like they're all the way down and you don't need to coil that. I would anyway, just for some extra security. That's a place where these, as they dry, tend to want to pop up, and you will get a little gap there if you don't add a little bit of extra clay. So I've got just a little chunk of clay here. I don't want anything massive here. I'm just going to take a little pinch of this and roll it in my hands. I don't need a ton of clay here. Just a little bit. All right, something like this. You can see that compared to like the width of my finger, it's not much. That's what I'm looking for all the way around. And this is not an exact science. I'm just gonna roll the rest of this out on the table. All right, so I've got something like this to start with. I might roll a couple of them. I'll probably need a couple that size, so I'll grab another little pinch. Start rolling it in my hands. And then finish it off on the table till it's about the size of the coil that I just rolled. About the width of it. All right, and those are just quick. They don't have to be even or perfect in any way. We're just adding a little extra clay in there. So the next thing I'm gonna do is get these coils wet. You can either dip them in your water or hit them with a paintbrush. And then I like to score them as well. So I really wanna integrate these coils into the dish. So I've scored where the coils are gonna go. And then I'm also scoring the coil. I don't want them to sit on top of the clay. I want them to be part of this clay, as if they were never separate things. So I'm gonna start on one of my lower walls, one of the first ones that got folded in, not the top one. And I'm gonna stick that coil right in that corner. I'm not gonna squish it all the way down yet. I'm going to use a tool, and I usually use like the end of a paintbrush, and start pushing it in. So the idea is I'm kind of displacing the clay by doing this. I'm kind of making up and down marks with this tool here, which is fine because when I blend it out, that's all gonna mash together. You'll never see that texture there. But I really want to get that clay pushed down into that corner so that it's resting in this space here between the wall and the floor. I don't want that sharp corner. I want to make kind of a curved edge there. I want to get that extra clay in there. And so you can see how ridged that is. That's fine. We're going to wipe all that out. So I'm just going to come around the corner. We'll need a little bit of extra clay where the overlap piece is. You're going to have a gap there. That's totally fine. Don't worry about it. I'm just going to kind of keep coming around here. And as I run out of clay, I will get my next piece of coil wet. I'll give it a quick score mark. And we'll start again. All right, so really just pushing that clay as deeply into that corner as possible. Okay, so I've gone all the way around. And now I'm gonna add a little bit of extra clay in these gaps here where I've got my overlapping walls. So here I've got just like a little ball that was left over from this section. I'll stick right in there. And we'll do the same thing on the other three corners. Little ball right there. Patch that in. And now we're ready to smooth this out. So since these lines are pretty much vertical lines, if I go horizontally across them, that will kind of redistribute the clay and smooth them out. You see how easy that is to get rid of that texture there? Instead of using my finger, I might use my finger once all the way around just to kind of make sure all that clay is pushed in there really nicely. And then I'm going to take a rib. And that rib is going to help me get that same kind of curve or the same kind of profile all the way around. So just a plastic rib. I'm going to use this one because I like the profile of the nose of this one. Whatever you've got laying around is totally fine. You can even use a wood stick tool if you've got one that you like. So I'm going to go all the way around the bottom. kind of holding that nose in there, and I'm holding it with my finger. I'm applying pressure onto the nose of the rib with this finger, and that's what's doing all the scraping. If I'm holding the rib further back like this, I'm not applying enough pressure to really scrape off the amount of clay that I want to scrape off. So applying firm pressure there behind the nose of that rib and giving it a scrape. Getting that all cleaned up against the floor there. And then the next step is going to be to take the rib and hold it in the opposite direction and get the wall cleaned up. So it should clean up pretty easily as long as you're using fresh soft clay there. If you're having trouble and you can't seem to get this to smooth out, you could also come back to your scoring rib, score that area that you want to blend. So I've scored that whole edge right there, and now I can come back with this rib and it will smooth out really nicely. So anytime you're trying to smooth something out and you're having trouble, you keep seeing places where you just can't seem to get it flat or get it smooth, go ahead and score that area. You probably just need to redistribute the clay. When you score, you make all those little marks in the clay, and you're also taking clay out. And then the high spots can fill in the low spots once you rib over that clay and recompress it. All right, do a little work, make sure those corners are filled in here. See how nice and clean that looks? So I'm seeing like a little gap here. I'm gonna score this side as well. Just wherever you see that mark, and go in two directions too. I've gone across and now I'm going up and down. Really want to kind of redistribute that clay so I can get the high spots taken down and the low spots filled in. Whole idea there. I'm also constantly cleaning my rib off, so I'm not leaving a lot of marks on the clay, hopefully. And I'm finding that I have a low spot right in this corner. I just can't seem to get it leveled. So I'm gonna actually score that place that's low. Take a little bit of clay that I just scraped off that was on the tip of my rib. Dip my rib in some water. I'm gonna score that little tiny bit of clay. Stick it into that low spot. I'm pushing it in with my finger. And now I'm going to take my scoring rib again and kind of smooth it into the surface through scoring. And now again, I can come in with my soft rib and make sure everything's smoothed out and nice and even. And I've just filled in that little low spot there, so everything looks consistent again. And how fussy you want to be on the bottom is up to you. Where I really notice this is when I'm glazing. If I don't have a nice defined line around here, sometimes it's hard to know when to stop the glaze if you're filling this in with glaze. So having just a nice defined line here that's nice and straight as well will really help in that glazing step. Okay, so there's that. I'm just going to come in again with a soft rib now, a softer rib, one of these red ones, and erase any marks I've left, any little bits of clay out of here that I need to clean up. Make sure that these walls that are going to touch the floor or going to touch your table are really nice and smooth. You don't want that to scratch your table. So So really making sure that those are clean, compressed, smoothed out. No grog sticking up out of the surface if you got grog in your clay. Okay, I want to get into these edges a little bit too and clean those up. They're not as clean as they could be. If I can get a good close shot of that for you, you can see kind of it's still kind of a mess in here. So I kind of want to define that edge. So sometimes that's just done with a paintbrush, kind of getting in there. But I think for this, I'm going to use a tool. So I'm going to grab, I've got this rubber tip tool here. So I'm going to grab this rubber tip tool and just kind of draw where that edge is. Give it some definition. Here too. So I'm going to clean up any score marks or anything that's going on in there. Come in, kind of draw where that corner is. I'm trying to match these sides so you can kind of see where it's folded. I'm kind of showing you that connection there. So we'll flip it around and do it on the other side as well. So kind of start up in here, make sure that's all compressed, sealed, cleaned, and then come down here and draw into the corner. And this is just the way I do this. It's not right or wrong or anything like that. It's really just aesthetic. But you do want to make sure you've compressed inside this area here. Okay, so now I've got a little bit of definition here, and these lines kind of match, so it seems to make a little more sense. It's not as ambiguous. That corner there, it's got some shape to it. And then the last thing you have to do, and this is really, really important, is poke a hole in this, because this is trapped air. So if you've got steam in there during the firing, it will explode out. You'll get a big crack somewhere, or a pop, or whatever. So I'm gonna take a needle tool, and sometimes I go as small as something like a straight pin instead of a needle tool. And I used to put these holes like right down in this corner, but I don't always get a lot of glaze down in that corner. So I've started putting them up higher, maybe in the edge up here, because I know there's going to be glaze there. And I'm going to fill that in later in the glazing process. So I'm going to put one there. And just for extra security, makes me feel better, I'm going to put one in on this side too. Okay. And then that's pretty much it for the bottom of the plate, okay? So there is that. We've poked our holes. I want to get it back sitting on the bottom so that it's nice and flat. When I dry these, I usually leave them on a drywall board or a piece of plywood, something that's porous and is going to let the clay dry. And I also might leave something like a towel or canvas sitting on top of them so that I'm slowing the drying a little bit on the top, but not as much as if I would have plastic over top of it. And I'm also adding some fabric that has a little bit of weight. So if I've got canvas, it's usually a couple sheets of canvas that's kind of weighing that down. I'm trying to keep these corners from drying faster than the center of the clay and popping up. But if the bottom is on a drywall board and you've got some kind of a fabric, some kind of cloth, towels, canvas, whatever you got, laying on top, it should dry out pretty evenly. I check them periodically, maybe add a little bit more weight on the top if you feel like your edges are curling up, but they usually don't warp too bad. All right, so there's one more secret step to completing this plate. This is just a dried up piece of my clay body. I'm putting it in the plate that's fired, or a cup, anything, a bowl would be fine. And I'm gonna grind it with anything, any kind of a tool. You could use the bottom of a cup, whatever. I'm just making a fine dust out of this clay body. And what I'm going to do is bisque fire this dust when I bisque fire my plates. So you can either put it on the surface of the plate once the plate is dry, Or you could put it in a little bowl or a little cup or anything you're going to bisque, or you could put it into something that's already bisqued. But the point of this is that now I will have bisque-fired dust that is the same clay as my clay body. I don't know if you guys can see that at all. I'm trying to get it as fine as possible. Okay, I don't want any chunks in there, so I'll grind that up a little bit more. I've still got some little chunks in there. But what I do is I take this dust, once it's bisque fired, I will mix it with my glaze when I am glazing, and I'll take this little bit of clay dust mixed with glaze and stick it into these little holes that I've made in the corners. So that seals up that corner completely. So you don't get water or anything in the dish once it's done, in case the glaze doesn't seal it by itself. They become invisible and it becomes trapped air again. All right, so that's that for that trapped air plate. We're all finished making it. You can translate this into any size, square or rectangle that you want. They make great serving platters. The only other word of caution that I have for you guys is when you glaze them, make sure your glaze is completely dry before you put it into your glaze firing. Because you've plugged up your holes that you've made in the corners, you've got trapped air again. So if your glaze is wet and you put it in the kiln, start the kiln right away, you can get steam in these edges again and cause a crack or kind of a pop in the kiln. So just make sure the glaze is dry. You won't have any issues. So I should be doing another video here soon for you guys. I hope you guys are taking care out there, being safe. Hope to see you soon.